Hi, I'm Troy Jakoski. In this video we'll go through the overhaul procedure for the E13 TRS bottom bracket, specifically the 100mm wide bottom bracket shell that's fitted on most fat bikes today. Now the bearings used in the E13 TRS bottom bracket are a little bit different to a lot of other bottom bracket kits that are out there. They use angular contact bearings. When we dig a little bit deeper into the bearing disassembly, we'll have a closer look at the shell, and you'll see exactly what I mean by angular contact bearing. And go through and remove that crank arm. Use a soft face hammer just to lightly tap that spindle out. Should only take a little knock there just to break the stiction. What you'll be left with now is the bottom bracket cup still in the frame. Now this service will be done with the BB cups still in the frame. There are a few things that we've got to remove first, like this little black outer cap here to get to the bearing itself. Now this is a labyrinth seal, so what it has is a little shape inside molded into the plastic, and that forms a labyrinth for any dirt or contamination to get past before it actually gets to the bearing proper. So it is a little bit delicate. I don't like to use any metal tools on it. So in this case here, we'll be able to just get our fingernails on underneath that and prise that straight off. What we are down to now is the primary seal level. We can take our sharp blade and just prise that little guy out there. Okay, so with the bearing at this point, there are several things that we can do. We can go through and do a minor service on this, clean out all the excess grease away from that bearing, and then repack with some fresh grease, work it through to really get it firmly bedded in that bearing. Put the seal back on, put that primary seal back on, reinstall the cranks and call it done. We're going to go to the next level with this bearing service. We're going to pop out that inner race on the bearing, pull the bearing cartridge out, and have a look and inspect all those bearing races to make sure there's no corrosion or any pitting. So using a screwdriver against the back edge of that inner race, very gently prise that inner race out, just a very small amount until you see that pop out like so. Now at this point, reposition your screwdriver so your screwdriver is driving directly on that inner race and not tearing the lip off that inner seal, that back seal that's inside the cartridge. So once you've repositioned your screwdriver, just give a small amount of leverage, and that inner race will pop straight out, revealing the bearing holder. Cup your hand underneath it, just dig that out there with a fingernail. So now you can just go through and clean that outer race on that bearing shell still in the bottom bracket cup. Get a good torch, go through and have a good close look at all of the bearing surfaces as well as the inner lips on that seal to make sure that nothing's amiss. If you do have a failure of that inner seal, any water that builds up in the bottom bracket shell will go straight into that bearing, and of course you'll end up with contamination pretty quick. So when we talk about angular contact bearings, we're talking about a bearing that has a full shoulder like that, and then the hollow for the bearing and the retainer to run through. This style of bearing gives us a lot more serviceability, rebuildability, as well as preload adjustment with a much better bearing support during reassembly. Now I've just got the bearing there and loosen a cup, add a little bit of solvent, and just run that through with a nice soft brush, just get rid of any contaminants that might be on that bearing and the retainer. So what I've done to hold those loose balls in place in the retainer is just coated it with a light coating of grease on the outside. The grease I'm using is a bearing specific grease. It's Teflon fortified, and it's very highly resistant to wash out, so it's very waterproof grease. With fill ratios, many manufacturers will use about a 10 to 15% fill ratio of the cavity inside the bearing itself. So if you use that as a rough rule of thumb, you can overpack it, but it just may reduce the performance of the bearing a little bit in regards to how much grease is inside that cavity. Any excess grease, of course, will just push out past those seals, and may improve the sealing effectiveness of the bearing itself. So this is probably the part of the service where you'll need to use a specialised tool to get that inner race in correctly into the bearing. Pop pop that guy in there. Now a bearing press like this is ideal. It allows you to put gradual pressure on there, and also with the press plates there, allows you to put on even pressure on both sides. So I'm using the 6806 bearing plate, which is specific to the BB30 standard. Now this perfectly matches that bearing, and now you heard that little click. That bearing in a race is now perfectly seated. So what we can do now is just overfill that bearing cavity, and then we can install our bearing seal like so. Just even pressure all the way around, and install that outer cap. So once we've serviced both bearings, we're ready to assemble the cranks. Put a light coating of grease on all mating surfaces. The ability to tune the bearings in this way gives us a lot of options. We can tune the lubricant to suit the ambient conditions that we'll face. So obviously the lube that I'd use in Australia is totally different to what I'd use in Alaska in a snow racing environment. For low temperature applications, I'd probably use something like a Fillwood tenacious oil, which has much better suitability to low ambient temperatures. Well, we're just about done. All we've got to do now is put the left-hand crank arm on, tension up the bearings with the APS tensioner, and the bike's pretty much good to go. My name's Troy Jakoski. Thanks for watching my video.